has a listing agreement just like, you know, a actual listing, sale listing. Let me pull these up. And at the first of the year, they put in this really annoying disclosure. That's sort of like a seller property questionnaire or a real estate transfer disclosure statement if you've taken a disclosure class.
Excuse me, can you do residential lease month to month?
I'm going to do that next. Right now I'm doing the lease listing agreement.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That.
No worries. Okay. Everyone at home, can you see the lease listing agreement?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Great. Okay. We have the King of Leases, George Morales, with us today. We're graced by the King of Leases during lease class.
Who's George Morales?
He's an agent in our office. He's on Zoom.
Oh.
And the past 2 years, he won the same award in the office.
Oh, thank you, Christen. You look so cute.
Thank you, love. And he won another award. What was that, George? Fancy.
Number 3 in volume as a solo agent. Thank you.
You're welcome, Boo. All right, let's see here. So the lease listing agreement, the acronym is LL. It's very similar to a listing agreement. So you'll have date prepared, which is the legal reference date at the top left. Rental property owner, formerly referred to as landlord. When they changed the documents this year, they started calling it rental property owner. Okay, I don't know why. Just confused me. People like myself, I could barely keep the word seller and landlord separate before. So now rental property owner is the landlord. Hereby employs and grants blank broker. That's not me as an agent. That would be Keller Williams Beverly Hills. Okay. And you'd have a start and end date for the listing period. Now, the very big difference between lease listing agreement and a sale listing is I do not believe that we have to get it into the MLS within those 2 days. I don't believe that there are laws or rules against shopping it as a pocket to the public either. Okay. And I think the reason for this is there are a lot of rentals that have no agent representation. Okay. So we don't have to worry about getting the date it's going to go on the MLS correct here. However, it will still show days on market from this beginning date whenever you are ready to put it on the MLS. So I would modify it, the start of the listing period, to whenever I know I'm going to put it on the MLS. So it shows 0 days on market. So you'll have the city, the county, the property address, and then the dollar amount for the rent. So this would be per, and it can be blank, but most of us look at rent in the monthly quantity, dollar amount, sorry. Security deposit. There are some rules with security deposit. The maximum allowable security deposit on an unfurnished rental unit is 2 months. And furnished, guys? Three, yes. And what if they have pets and the owner wants to charge an additional pet deposit? If we've already reached that 2 or 3 month maximum, that's not possible. The state looks at all deposit money as the same, nor can any portion of deposit funds be non-refundable. It is not possible, okay? All deposit funds are refundable based on the condition of the unit when it is returned.
So sorry.
Yeah.
The beginning date and ending date, is that like also 6 months?
I don't want to deal with the lease to begin with, but if I can't lease it in 3 months, I don't want that puppy anymore.
3 months.
I do 3 months just because I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to be bound to it for 6 months.
Okay.
And sorry, I'll cast up here for you guys. Okay, so people, particularly landlords, get very confused. They like to use the words first, last, and security deposit. Last month's rent is not paid. Okay, you can ask for prepayment of rent. It is prepaid rent, right? That's called prepaid rent. And it must be applied to whatever calendar month's rent is due next. There is no such thing as last month's rent. So particularly older people, I run into this all the time and I'll be like, okay, so there is no such thing. There's security deposit and rent, and that's it. So let's take that out of your language and let me tell you about the security deposit rules. And, you know, you can tell me what your preference is. A lot of people are always like, hey, I want the maximum amount of security deposit I can get. Well, when you're looking at really lower end rental, I'm thinking of myself, you know, like 7, 8 years ago, I could barely afford that rent, but I paid my rent. I made enough money to pay my rent, but I certainly didn't have enough money to give them 1st and 2 months security. So, you know, I remind my clients, and I'll say specifically me, I'll say before I really started making money, honey, I was your target audience and I paid my rent. Do you want to, you know, price those people out? Now, when we get into higher end, they should have that, right? If we're looking at a $10,000 a month rental, they should have no problem coming up with $20,000 security deposit. But when we're looking at a $2,500 a month rental, asking me for a $5,000, you know, plus 1st month's rent, that's going to be tough for me at the time, right? So I try to use myself as an example there. And, you know, I ask my clients, and by the way, I won't do a lease for anyone who didn't buy it from me or isn't working with me. So they know me. I'm like, so are you telling me I'm not good enough for you? Would you really want to miss out on me as a tenant? And I'm like, by the way, don't rent to lawyers or real estate agents. Yeah. And they're like, for real? And I'm like, hey, if they're your only applicants, do it. Yes.
Is there a reason why they ask for the last month's rent? Because I see a lot of clients now, they requesting like for 2 months
security deposit
and 1 month's rent and the last month's rent. Is there a reason why they say that?
They're old school, probably they don't know any better.
Oh.
I don't know. I think landlords might also be a little bit worried because there's all of this COVID pandemic protection still in place. And there is no end in sight for renters. It's, I think, at least a year following the lifting of the emergency protective order by the governor or by the mayor.
It's another year.
It'll be another year and it's still in place.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I don't want to get into the politics of it. It makes me very angry.
So with the maximum security deposit being 2 months for unfurnished property, can they still do what she said, where they're asking for 1st month,
Sure.
2 months, and an additional?
Sure.
How do you walk away from that? Like, is there a way to still get the property but not pay the last month's rent?
I mean, no, you just walk away from it. I mean, if a landlord wants 3 months of rent upfront prepaid, that's my choice as the applicant to decide if I want that or not. But if it's a property that's listed like this, that should be disclosed on the MLS and agent private remarks so that you discuss it with your client before showing it to them and before having them submit their application. Also, I'll have you know, a landlord sometimes ask me, well, what do you recommend? And I'll tell them the story I just told you about myself then and now. But I will also, you know, tell them we can leave it as negotiable. We can say it's DOC, which is depending on credit, right? Because if you had someone like, and that's what I'm going to tell them is, you know, that person like me, you might not have an issue renting to.
Right.
They're probably going to have amazing credit. So we're going to see that indicator there, right? So we can do it depending on credit. Yes.
How much is so what is the max on prepaid rent?
There is no max, but I mean, not many renters are going to be willing to do it, particularly in the lower end.
Okay.
Yeah. And like I said, it should be disclosed up front because I'm going to be awfully mad if, you know, I applied, you pulled on my credit, you approved me, and then you're like, but I want this abnormal, very aggressive thing. Type of tenancy. So if you're using this lease listing agreement, it can be more than one type. You can have a rental where the owner is offering it for shorter term, medium term, long term, very long term. Okay. So you could check all of these boxes if you wanted. You could say 1 year plus here if the owner's open to all of it. However, my guess is that the rent amount is probably going to be different for each situation, right? A lot of times, particularly with higher end furnished homes, the landlord will do short-term leasing, except they'll want a higher dollar amount for that than they will for the long term.
So
yes.
there is another form, residential listing agreement. this apply to the apartment and condo or apply to anything?
This is for leases only.
I know, but there's no residential listing agreement? Is that-
Residential listing agreement is for single family and condominiums.
Oh, okay, so this is for apartment.
This is for apartment,
Oh,
yes.
okay,
I mean, it could be for a single family too, John. It's,
Okay,
are you
just-
renting or
just-
buying? That's the difference. To
Okay,
be sold or to be rented.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So if you are going to be offering a lease listing for multiple types of tenancy, you're going to want to, under the other term section, where is it? Here, under 2G, additional terms, you're going to want to identify what price for what situation. You know, $45,000 a month if it's anything shorter than blank period of time. And what I'd put in here for the rent amount would be for that 1-year lease. I put the standard rent amount in here for that. Personal property that will not be maintained or replaced by RPO, landlord. This is unusual. Most of the time in rentals, a landlord is expected to maintain the appliances that are there, all right? I've seen landlords lately try to use it as a negotiation tactic. Oh, I'll agree to maintain this if you'll do a 2nd year. Really silly, very aggressive. Let me tell you, leases are some of the work I hate the most, not just because of the lack of money, but it's also very difficult negotiating between the two parties. Things are so much more negotiable than real estate. The people involved are so much less committed to the cause. And a lot of landlords or tenants, you'll see like how difficult they become, and more leases that look like they're going to move forward actually fall apart, you know, by the time that you get not even quite done with drafting the lease agreement that everyone's happy with. Okay, so you know, the more difficult your landlord becomes, renters are going to see that, the other agent's going to see that. So you want to try to manage your clients always. You want to keep your seller kind of in the realm of reality and fairness. Like, well, if it took you an extra month to rent your property because you want to not maintain the appliances in the apartment, wouldn't that cost you more than basically replacing pretty much everything in there? Yeah, exactly. And that's a lot of times how I work with my clients as far as I'm leasing, is I'll actually work out the numbers for them. I'll be like, all right, well, you've listed at 11,000. I told you it was probably worth between 10 and 10.5. Someone's come in at 10,250, right? Let's work out what the difference between 10,250 and 11 is. That's 750 a month times 12 months. So what is that, 9?
Wait, say that again, sorry.
So when I'm trying to get people to be reasonable about rental dollar amounts, right? Let's say I have something listed for $11,000 a month. I get an offer for 10,250. And my clients are like, I don't know about that. Well, if I'm not getting showings, if I'm not getting traction, you know, it's really my job to manage their expectations. And I'll literally show them. I'll show them the difference. 11,000 minus 10,250. That's 750 times 12. What is that? $9,000? Yeah. So I'm sorry. So, well, we're not getting a lot of showings. These are our only applicants. So do you want the bird in the hand or do you want to wait for 2 in the bush? It's up to you, but let me show you. Even if it takes 1 more month, you will have made more money by taking this lower number. Right. So that's a lot of times how I sway landlords or tenants to getting where they want to get. You know, I had it on the flip side. I had a tenant, an older guy. I sold his house because he couldn't like make it up and down the stairs on his 2nd floor several years ago. Still one of my biggest sale listings I've ever had. And he is a very difficult tenant. He is a very difficult tenant client. I love the guy, but difficult. And, you know, I have to tell him, look, let's get into that after. You need to get the lease first. But the last 3 times I put him into something, you know, he's like, oh, here's my budget. And he's very, very like stuck on it. We found something perfect. The only thing he liked in 4 months. And it was $200 a month over his budget. So I worked it out for him. And I was like, well, the building is a condo. It includes this utility, this utility. You're coming from a single family. What is that? What did that cost you a year? Let's look at the 200 times 12. That's $2,400 a year. I mean, I know that you're retired. And so you have fixed income and plans. So I'm not trying to do anything here, but does it fit into your budget at that point? I mean, I'm not trying to convince him to do anything he shouldn't, but it's about managing expectations and working out the numbers for people. So, you know, just keep that in mind. I think it's one of the biggest tools when I'm working with a landlord, and also when I'm managing their expectations with a listing agreement, is we don't want to shoot for the sun, moon, and stars. You want a good tenant who pays on time, and you want a good rent. Let's not kill it by being overly aggressive.
Piggy wiggy.
What's that?
Piggy wiggy.
Yeah.
Sorry, is there a standard for that? What's the standard for that in terms of tenant or landlord maintaining?
It is standard for the tenant, for the landlord to maintain all appliances. And everything within the property. And outside of the property, if it's a single family or has any outdoor space, unless damage was caused by the tenant, then the tenant would be financially responsible for it, or their guests, or animals. Well, I have my baby going around chewing on the corners of my walls, so I'm like, please be no lead-based paint, please be no lead-based paint here.
Oh, yeah.
It was built after 1978. At least I know that, right? Items excluded from lease rental, I'll give you an example. So a lot of landlords, they keep property, particularly higher end ones, they will keep their single family residences as they buy up. But they'll have, like, you know, one of the closets in the garage or downstairs somewhere that's full of paint and maintenance items. So we'll exclude this closet and we'll call it the owner's closet. It needs to be kept locked and all of that. But anything like that, that is not for use by the tenant, that is part of the property, needs to be itemized here.
In F, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Additional terms, again, anything that you need here. So I can't remember if it's on the lease listing agreement, but I like to get into this before I get into the lease negotiation with the tenant involved. Is, do you want them to carry renter's insurance? And if so, how much do you want them to have coverage for?
Usually more with for baby.
Yeah. Well, on the pet addendum, it says that renter's insurance should also cover pets, and it doesn't give a price for that. And so versus, I'll put the dollar amount for the basic coverage, but I'll use that pet addendum, which doesn't specify a coverage. It just specifies that it includes it. And I think that probably adds significant more money than what I'm looking for. Yes.
So I can request having renter's insurance for any renter that comes in.
Yeah.
I mean,
This should be disclosed up front and part of the list, like made known.
But do you think it's something that needs to be done?
100%.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Is that going to be in the additional terms?
Yeah, I'd write it in additional terms. I'd put it on private remarks in the MLS. I'd let any applicant know. So these are what the owner wants. I actually have a cheat sheet of things that maybe an unrepresented tenant wouldn't know. That way they're aware. Yes. I saw hands somewhere.
So
Yeah.
what did you say you would put in there for the additional terms?
Landlord will require, or RPO will require tenants to carry renter's insurance policy and at a minimum coverage amount of blank dollars.
Man,
And it's pretty common to go from like 30 to 100.
Do you prefer your clients to pay like 1 month?
I can barely hear you, I'm sorry.
So I'm saying, do you recommend your clients to pay 1 month's rent insurance or one whole year?
Doesn't matter to me. It probably depends on their insurance carrier and if they have a benefit for paying it all up front. None of my business, I don't care. I just want to make sure that they have the insurance. I will tell you this, there's a company called Lemonade that started off in and specializes mostly in renter's insurance. They are super cheap, and I had them. Someone broke into my car when I was at the gym, stole like a designer bag, a designer pair of shoes, my laptop, you know, like my glasses, my wallet was designer. So like all of these things add up, right? They were so good. They gave me so much money. Like they maxed out my policy on that. They were so good. They were so easy. Everything was online. I've never had an easy time with an insurance company before in my life. So I can't recommend them highly enough. I think my coverage was like $11 a month.
Really?
Lemonade or lemonade?
Lemonade, yep. And disclaimer, I do own stock in the company, but I bought it after I was so impressed.
That's right.
Yeah, I do still use them currently.
Like $40 a month.
Yeah, you know what? After, I realized that I didn't have coverage for my puppy, that I didn't have coverage for my jewelry, and I upped it. And I was like, oh, if any of my pieces of jewelry were in here, they would have been excluded. Yeah, so it can go much higher, but still $40 a month to cut me a check for 22 grand because I was an idiot and left all of my stuff visible in my front seat of my car, at the gym.
I didn't even know that my husband's laptop and everything was stolen. I didn't even know to call there. And we have
Renters or owners insurance will do that. Yeah. And why is it advantageous to a landlord for the tenant to carry renter's insurance? Well, if something happens to the house, like roof leak, that damages all the tenant's property, the homeowner's insurance policy is not going to cover that. So the tenant can then go personally after the landlord for that, right? That's why it's to a landlord's advantage to require the renter to carry the renter's insurance, but it's so cheap. It's advantageous to the renter as well. I'm almost like, I hate my couch now. Could there be a leak, please? I'm like, person upstairs. Help me out. Let's see here. So then it is how much percent of rent. So the going rate for total commission percentage payment on lease is all over the board and depends on if it's short term and longer term. So it's nice. They did actually separate out the commission for short term, long term versus short term. Short term is typically much higher, right? Because why would you do all of that work for nothing? Leases don't pay much. I tend to go from about, I do 5 or 6% total. I always try to go for 6. It depends on like how important that client is to me. If they bought 5 fourplexes from me and 3 single family residences, I'm not trying to take 6% from them. But if I'm trekking all over town to go rent out something, I sold them something else, years ago, but that's it. And now they want me to lease all of their income property. And I'm like, no. And they're like, yes, that's the only time I'll do it. Then I'm like, fine, 6%. I'm not driving over here to rent your $3,000 a month unit. It's actually going to make me lose money. Even at 6, I'm probably still losing money, even if I double end it. It is very common, by the way, to double end leases. Can anyone tell me why?
Because there's not that much money involved.
It's not why. It doesn't matter to us how much money is involved. It's because renters don't usually have agent representation. And when you list a lease, it goes to Zillow. People renting will reach out to the listing agent directly. They're not looking for an agent. Yes.
So you say, let's say 5%. I'm supposed to do this today. I only get the 5% if I do both sides?
Yeah, you only get 2.5.
Wow.
Yeah. Leases are not worth it unless they're very expensive. And even then, I don't know if they're worth it. Think about this. How are you going to lease something without professional photos? Good professional photos are in the $300 to $400 range, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes when I'll have a client like that, I'll be like, I'm just gonna use this name, like Chad, like for real, I'm not gonna make any money. This is a favor and I do love you, but you have to pay for your own photos. Nice thing is you'll own them and we can use them every time. I'm not paying for them on top of going here to your janky ass little, and I can talk to him that way. He'll laugh. Ha ha ha.
It's 5% of the year rent, right?
Yeah, so the way it's calculated is, let's say the rent is $1,000 per month. That's $12,000 total. If you had represented both sides, you would get 5% commission. So you would take 12,000 times 0.05. That's the total commission. If you represented one side, 0.025 would be what you multiply that 12,000 by. Does that make sense? But if you get into what's up?
600 for 2.5%.
Yeah, I did that in my head.
But I mean, like, look at this. Like, I just rented a house from my clients who bought a nicer house. It was $10,000 a month, and I got both sides. And I think after my split and all of that stuff, I'll probably get about $5K. But that's not a $10,000 a month lease, and I had to drive way the fuck up into the canyons every single time to show it. I still wish I didn't do it. I still haven't turned the paperwork in on it. I don't want to touch that thing, but I did because the client, right? There is actually more paperwork that's issued from an agent on the tenant side, at least. No, both sides. In a lease than there is in a sale transaction. Can you believe that? we issue less documents as agents. Now, there are more documents involved in the sale because there's escrow, title, lending professional, all of that. But there are more documents and disclosures for us as agents on a lease. All right, moving on. What about month to month? Common? Any idea? What have you seen on the MLS looking for short-term rentals? All over the place. I've seen 5 to 20. I wouldn't touch this for under 10. I'd like to try more for 20. Yeah, I mean, short-term is really larger numbers anyways, but it's a lot of work. However, there's something called a vacation rental agreement. Okay? And so if it is under 30 days, so it's really short-term, you don't have to do a lease listing agreement. It is not a lease. It is a vacation rental. So just so you know, it's a lot less work in a different form.
The calculation of the commission same, right?
Yep.
It's like.
Yeah, so if I have a month-to-month rental, okay, at 10% and it's $40,000 a month, they do 1 month, that's $4 grand. If it's 10%, right? If I represent both sides, it's $2 grand if I represent one side. I will oftentimes also, for shorter term rentals, a lot of my clients will just want me to keep it on permanently. And so I'll continue to handle this for them. And I'll just charge them a flat fee every time. Usually this is someone who bought a nice home from me. So I'm just, and as a courtesy, yeah.
For short term, it's 10% for commission, right?
It's all negotiable, but I wouldn't do it for less than 10. And I've seen it all the way up to 20. It depends on what your relationship's like. I mean, right? What is king in our business? It's not how much commission we charge. It's our relationship with our client, right? So if you know, trying to get a couple more $100 out of them is going to hurt your relationship, is it worth it? Probably not. Yeah. I find a way to make sure they know I'm doing them a favor. I'll be like, I don't want to do this for real, but I will because it's you. Most of the time I'm not even like that. I'm like, one of my teenagers can do it. I'm not doing it, but I love you. All right. This is called the exclusion period. It's just like the sale listing agreement. Basically, if you show the property to anyone during your listing period, you keep track of who you've shown it to, and you provide that list to the property owner before it cancels or expires, and anyone within whatever time frame you put in here rents it, you're still entitled to the commission. So what's standard on a sale, guys?
180 days.
Yeah, 180 is standard on a sale. However, on a lease, which I don't even look for a 6-month listing period on, I do 90, but that's just me. If you're getting into higher end stuff, higher end anything takes longer to sell, takes longer to rent as well. So I might have done a 6-month listing agreement on a much higher end property lease. I very well may write 180 days in this section if it's, you know, higher end. Okay. If there's any kind of side agreements as far as what they're going to pay you, like I said, with shorter term, it can get weird and creative. But check with Michael Rosales if you're going to take any kind of payment other than what standard, which is a percentage. Okay, but you can write that in here. All right, my favorite section in the entire lease listing agreement, the only one that I'm interested in, is 3E. If the tenant buys the property from you, landlord, I get blank % of the selling price, and I will represent you.
What does that mean?
It means if the tenant that leased from you during the time that I leased it for you buys it from you, you are required to work with me, and I am entitled to blank % of the commission. Yes.
If they kind of know that it's a rent with an option to buy in the beginning, would you put that in?
I would always put this in.
Okay.
And it has worked, and I have done 2 of them.
So if the tenant directly buys from the seller, is that under agent? I mean, how does it work?
Well, I don't care if the tenant wants to try someone else because this is a lease listing agreement. So who's my agreement with? The property owner, not the tenant, right?
Right.
So this is the seller agreeing to pay me whatever % I write in here. I write the 5%. The tenant very well may want to work with me. They may very well not to. Even if I write 5% in here, if the tenant has their own agent and wants to use their own agent, do you think I'm coughing up the other 2.5 to the other agent? 100%.
You are?
Mhm. Yeah, I'm not gonna force a tenant to work with me. That's still representation. Like that's, I can't do the best job for them. Plus my relationship is clearly with the property owner, right? I have, my allegiances are clear already. And I am trying to keep myself out of court. Like I said yesterday, don't worry, you'll find yourself in court even on a property you never touched or saw. It will happen one day.
So Kristen, I have a question.
Yes.
How does it work with the lease? Do you have to put a big sign in the front, of course?
It's all covered in this agreement. It's not up to you, it's up to your client. But it goes on the MLS, which feeds out to Zillow, apartments.com, all of them. You can put a sign if you want to. If the owner wants to.
And then how do you do with showings with lease? Is that open house? How does it go?
Well, if I have a super popular lease and I've had 40 calls in the last week, you better believe I'm just doing group showings, which are kind of like open houses. So I'll be like, fine, I'm going to be here during this 2-hour period on Wednesday from 6 to 8. And I'm going to be here on Saturday from 11 to 2 or, you know, whatever, 11 to 1. And that's it. Anyone who wants to apply can apply because I'm not concerned about it renting for over at that point. But most rentals are not like that. Most of the time it's, I'm getting 1 call a week or something, maybe 2. I'm just doing private showings with them. I don't want them to wait because I don't want them to move on to another property. Remember, I don't want to work on this lease. I want to get it done. So if that means going, driving myself over there twice that week and showing it separately, fine with me. Yeah.
What about self-showing with the Supra? If they were the agent.
See, I'm an agent that believes that showing the property is one of your primary jobs.
Yeah.
And that is primarily
really
one of the
happening. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, see, I don't know what that agent's getting paid for. The people who put it on Supra and don't supervise, I don't understand.
In the valley, everyone is doing.
I know, South Bay also. Even worse than that, my seller's home, they'll let you in. I'm like, you're gonna let me talk to your seller without anyone present? Cool, all right. Yeah, I told you, what was it, last week? Los Angeles has very high business standards. If you're finding it difficult to really like make it as an agent, I mean, you have to have some experience here. But you've had a couple of sales, but it's just not taking up. Go to another state, honeys. You will murder your competition.
Wow.
Yeah. Again, I have no idea what they get paid for.
I never met my seller's agent, and we sold a close to $900,000 house. She never came. I saw it on Supra.
Were you happy with her?
Huh?
Were you happy with her?
She was good, but
yeah,
Supra, that was it. And I'm like, what do they do? Nothing.
Yeah.
They get paid.
Yeah, see, like I firmly believe that my clients are paying for me. And like I said, I have a fundamental belief myself in my business that making sure that showings happen and they happen accompanied and questions can be answered on the spot and follow-up can happen. I mean, how can I tell a landlord best feedback for something that's not leasing or not selling unless I see the face of the person looking, right? A lot of times they're not going to tell me something, or the other agent will get back to me if the party's not interested. These are really important pieces of information for me to have for my client. Also, how am I going to hit them up for a price reduction or to convince them to finally do that work or stage because I have this consistent complaint from whoever I'm showing it to all the time. I mean, I've done it myself where I go to these showings, it's on Supra, no agents there, and I miss an entire room of the house because I'm not familiar with it. There's a door behind a door, right? So, yes.
So the listing agent will put it on Supra, and then when we're bringing buyers, nobody will be there, and we'll have to just show the whole house. And
what if you have a question? You have to chase the fucking lazy ass listing agent down? Yeah, it's. I mean, I consider a lazy agent who puts a property on Supra or Lockbox. Yeah. Yeah. And there'll be agents out there that hate me for saying that. But, you know, I wish I could tell your client because I bet you they'd hire me instead of them at that point. You can't. You cannot talk to any client that has any kind of active listing with another agent. If I could be like, yeah, so I've been trying to show your house for about a month, but your agent wants to play a game. Like it's a favor to show it to me. No wonder it hasn't sold for 4 months. No, I can't do that. Wish I could. Yeah. Well, what you can do is reach out to their broker, unless they're their own broker. Even then, as long as you give them a reasonable amount of time to respond, you can reach out to the owner, not trying to get the listing or anything, but saying, I've been trying to schedule a showing with your agent. I'm not able to reach them. Here's the contact information I have for them. Can you please help me to schedule a showing? You can do that eventually. Okay. All right. Broker is authorized to cooperate with and compensate cooperating brokers, the other agent, basically, if there is one. And so it'd be half of whatever dollar amount for whatever type of rental situation we're talking about here, the long term, the short term. Okay. Tenant payments. Okay. Do you see that there is no last month's rent here? First month's rent is payable to, who do we have payable to? We have them payable to the rental property owner. We do not take rent payable to us or to Keller Williams. However, we have had difficulty as agents as a whole, not just at this brokerage, in the entire industry, getting landlords to pay us after we procure them their tenant and get them all of their money. So what is standard practice, and it is very confusing, is for us to have our commission as well as the other agent, if there is another agent, have that commission taken from the initial move-in funds, the deposit, and whatever first month's rent and or partial month rent we're collecting from them. And so they'll be bringing 3 checks, one for the rental property owner, well, 2 or 3, one for Keller Williams Beverly Hills, and possibly a third one for whatever other brokerage is involved. Does that make sense? And we have something called a lease money disposition. It is a Keller Williams form. And I'll show you really quickly. I have chat box going crazy, huh? Oh, you're talking about my lemonade investment. It hasn't been doing too well, guys, but no insurance company has. You've heard me talk about the insurance crisis in California as well. But hey, buy it. It'll make my stock go up. Thank you. All right, I'm going to stop share for a second for those of you at home so that you can see me, hopefully. Actually, if I do it, how would be best to do this? Pop up a blank Word document and show them a. Okay, let's see, let's do that. Here. All right, so what do I mean by that? Well, let's make stuff very simple, right? The rent is $10,000 a month. Okay. The security deposit is $10,000. Okay. So, and my commission is 5%. Okay. So to calculate my commission, I take 10,000 and I multiply it times the lease term. The lease term could be 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, the most common being 12, but right, that's just whatever period of time the tenant and landlord have agreed to. So the total commission is going to be based on, total rent is $120,000 for that year. Okay, this is assuming we're doing a 1-year rental. Okay, and my commission is 5% of that, so that's going to be $6K, right? Okay. So, yeah, it's lease overview from listing and tenant representation perspective. So, if the total rent's $120,000 in the calendar year, and the total commission is $6,000, because we represent both sides, it's 5% in this instance. And the tenant is bringing us a check for the first month's rent and security deposit. So that's going to be $20,000 check they're bringing us, right? However, of their $20,000 total check, I'm going to have them cut it as follows. If it's only me as the agent involved, I'm going to have them cut it $14,000 to the owner and 6,000 to Keller Williams, Beverly Hills. You get it. And the reason for that is I need to make sure we get paid. So when tenants usually give checks, they're not personal checks typically. We'd like cashier's check or money order. A lot of people are like, oh, I prefer wire. The owner's like, oh, I prefer wire. So I explained to them at this point how we do it, why we do it. A lot of times they're like, oh yeah, we did it that way last time. And so what I can do is I can ask the tenant to wire the owner's portion to the owner. And if the tenant would like to wire to Keller Williams, they may, or they can give me the cashier's check or money order to Keller Williams. I don't care how it comes. Right.
You have to negotiate with the seller. What about if they own it, say I'm going to pay you $6,000?
That is part of the lease listing agreement that we're looking at. It's not negotiable. It's already been decided by the time you rent it.
But the landlord saying that I'm going to pay you, don't take it from the tenant.
That is fraud against my brokerage.
Oh,
I cannot receive funds from a property owner for real estate services directly.
Oh, okay.
And you will run into shady little agents that try to do that on renewal payments for leases and things like that all the time. We just had it happen on our team where we extended a lease, and this Compass agent is like, oh, just write it out to my name personally. And we were like, yeah, that's not happening.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah.
So wait, Christen, so
sorry, two people talking at the same time. What?
Just that they can lose their.
Yeah, you can lose your license for that. Basic, simple fact is only a broker can receive payment. Even if you have your broker's license, you don't act in the capacity of a broker because you hang your license under Michael Rosales' broker license here. So all checks have to be made payable to Keller Williams. Yes.
So where do we write this agreement thing with the tenant? Like the checks?
I told you, and we'll get into it. It's at least money disposition. It's a Keller Williams document. Yeah. Sometimes I get lazy and like, I know my clients are good for it. You know, like this one I just did up in the valley from these people who bought an even nicer house for me. I just made it easy and I let the tenant wire the money to them because they're all super busy people. And I just told them, just mail me a personal check of yours for the dollar amount. I know that, you know, like I have that close of enough a relationship with them. I don't care. And I don't care about it sitting in the office for a week to clear the check and all of that. Like, it's not, you know, it's not the end of the world. But would I do that with every client? No. No. Let's see, where were we? All right. All right. So the payments are made payable to the residential property owner. And it says, when are they due, right? When is it due? Well, it's either at execution or upon possession or other. I'm sorry, I cannot get cashier's checks and money orders at the time of execution of the lease, right? We're doing this by DocuSign. This can be done at 8 o'clock at night. I'm not expecting a tenant to hand me checks immediately. They have to go to the bank and get the type that I want anyhow, right? Nor am I saying upon possession, because why would we take it off the market and do all the lease paperwork and everything with you and have it agreed to, even though we haven't received any money from it? So I always say other, and very similar to the earnest money deposit and a residential purchase agreement. I use the same term there. Within 3 business days of execution. It's execution of this, of the lease listing agreement, not lease listing agreement, of the lease agreement. You check a box here, like you can ask the owner, hey, would you like to receive electronic payments from your tenant? Most landlords would at this point. However, it's very important that you let them know we cannot require it. It is against state law.
Christen, your screen only shows the Microsoft Word on Zoom.
Sorry, thank you. All right, so we're here. So does anyone have any idea why we might not be allowed to say you must make electronic payment? We can give them an option of electronic payment, but we must also give a tenant an option to make payment via a check of some sort. Why, guys?
Because you can't dictate the method of payment. Yes.
No,
Wire
because some
transfer.
people are old and they're not really good at online banking stuff. Yeah. So if you have your 85-year-old grandmother who has trouble getting around, she's not going to go down to the bank to initiate a wire transfer. And she might not be comfortable with online banking. She might not be comfortable in these large apartment buildings that have these, you know, online services for paying the rent. She might not be able to figure that out, right? Yes, John.
So they can pay through Zoom or through Zoom
Zelle, you mean?
or Venmo. Is it legal?
It is legal to pay through whatever electronic platform the landlord dictates if the tenant wants to. What is not illegal is telling the tenant that is the only way they may make a rental payment. You must also allow them to mail you a check. Zelle has limits on how much money you can send them in a certain month.
3,500.
So how do you do it with big amounts? You can't do Zelle.
You can't do Zelle. You can do Venmo in larger amounts, I think.
I'm paying grants, it's over 3,500. We're paying just one day and the next day.
Yeah, you can break it up.
Yeah.
But I mean, it depends. Like I have so much money coming in and out of my accounts all the time, like especially with the team, we reimburse each other for things all the time. And I have like electronic deposits for my checks. Sometimes I can't make it to the bank for a little while. Sometimes I go over on whatever dollar amount. So, I mean, in that instance, it doesn't really matter, right? Because I am legally entitled to mailing them a check as well. I'm telling you guys this so that you know when your landlord client is like, this is the only way I want to accept payment. You need to let them know that violates state law. While I assume your tenant will very likely prefer to give you electronic payment, we may not make that the only method of payment that you accept. We must give them one regular method via
So
mail.
you have to create both of them, direct electronic or
It just says RPO permits tenant to pay rent by things.
So do we click that? Do we check?
That's up to your landlord. You ask the landlord if they want it that way. Some people don't want it that way. This is for your landlord to be like, no, I don't want electronic payment. They don't have to give the electronic payment option. They don't have to. This is mostly so you know, so you position the property correctly. Key safe lockbox, you check it if they allow you to use one. Sign, you check it if you want to install a for lease sign. Okay, just like the listing agreement. You're gonna let them know whether or not it will be on the MLS. But like I said, I don't think that a lease is subject to the same rules with the MLS, but always check with the MLS. Things change all the time. So if you're ever in question of a rule about when a listing has to go into the MLS, call them up and ask them. They are excellent. Their customer service is excellent. They're after hours. There's some hours on the weekends and they know the answer to every question you have to ask them. I make the joke that I want to know who trained them and I'd like to have children with them. And I'd like to hire them to, train my dogs, put me into shape. What? Whoever trained the MLS staff is amazing. I want them to come in and like make my life better in all fronts, like figure it out. My dogs, my apartment, me, like where can I improve? Because you somehow figured out how to get everything right. All right, let's see. Security and insurance. This is just about, maintaining insurance during the time that it's vacant and during showings, that things can get stolen, things can be broken, so forth. I don't really think that there's much else here that we need to go through. All right. So they made this, I told you, horrible, in my opinion, addition to the lease listing agreement this year. They started requiring this document called RPOD, Residential Property Owner Disclosure. Okay, and it's automatically attached to the lease listing agreement now, and I hate it. It says it shall be provided to a broker within 3 days of completing or with this agreement. Additionally, RPO shall, upon request by broker, update or complete new disclosure as required by law to be provided to a tenant, lessee with lease or rental agreement. I have had 2 leases since this started, and I had to have my owners, even though I gave them explicit instruction, correct it like redo it entirely 3 times. So I will no longer send this over electronic completion and signatures. I will only do this in person, like I would do a seller property questionnaire or transfer disclosure statement. And I think Michael Rosales is wrong, but he told me, oh, it's okay. It's not actually required. The way that this is written tells me it is.
Right. Shall be provided.
Shall is not optional, right? So I think that he is wrong. I have it in writing for that one that I just couldn't get right though. So yay, I'm off the hook. And it could have changed, honestly. Like I've told you this before, they change documents around on us all the time. So they could have changed it, you know, since the last time we looked at it.
That'd be a good question to pose to a real estate attorney.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a real estate attorney is going to be all that interested in a lease agreement, but you know, car legal would probably be a better place because they draft these documents. Yeah. Okay, when is our responsibility as an agent finished with a lease property? Well, for some reason, property owners seem to think that for our measly $600, I'm going to be managing this fucking property and they're horrible tenants for them as well. I am not. My job is done. When I put the tenant into the property, I deliver the keys to the tenant, I do the tenant walkthrough for the condition, or I complete the move-in inspection. It's called MIMO. Which
I love what you just said.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm like, they're like calling me. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's a landlord-tenant situation. I am no longer the agent involved. I've done what I was hired to do. I am not a property manager. I can, what do I play? I play rule of thumb with good assistant. I'd be happy to provide you with some referrals to property management companies. Oh, what does that cost? I have no idea. But I am happy to provide you with some referrals from people in the office I speak to. You know, a great person for a referral like that would probably be Leases. He owns, his family owns a ton of rental income property in the city. So he probably knows who's good. All right, let's see. Ooh. When that happens.
Oh, it's stressful this thing.
Huh?
I don't even know if I want to do this now.
I don't want to do it.
I really don't. She's my friend, and I told her I will. So.
Well, you're.
No, I sold her house.
Yeah, yeah, you better do it.
To me. She's like, "Why don't you rent it for me?"
Yeah. I don't mess with any of this. It's already completed. There's nothing else here we need to do. If for some reason you needed to add an addendum, I would. And guys, a disclosure regarding real estate agency relationships is required by our office. I don't know if it's required by the state. So I do add that in when I take a lease listing. Okay, because really I need to have that agency disclosure done at the time I create an agency relationship with the client, right? So I do add the agency disclosure in. And there's 2 types, right? Because one is for listing agent to seller or landlord, and one is for buyer's agent to buyer or tenant. Does that make sense? So there's 2 types, and you need one for who in this instance? You need one for landlord seller. I call it landlord seller because the document works for both. Okay. All right. You get it all signed off on. If the landlord is an entity, okay, you would explain that entity relationship like a representative capacity signature disclosure, which just explains, like, if I own the property in the name of ABC Trust, that Christen Tull is a trustee of ABC Trust, and that is all written in here. Okay. Now, the lease listing agreement doesn't cover everything you need to know to lease the property. So I strongly suggest, particularly if you're new at taking a lease listing, you go into the MLS Slim where you enter a listing and you can save them as incomplete. Start working on it, because and do it before the lease listing agreement, before you meet with the seller. Like you need to have a list of questions. What questions are not covered by the lease agreement, you're still going to need to know the answer so you can enter it into the MLS properly. So make a little list so that you take that list with you anytime you're going to draft, or anytime you're going to take a lease listing. Okay.
That's a list of questions, right?
Yeah, you need to, like, You need to know what you need to know that's not covered here for your MLS entry, and also so that you can answer the questions for the tenants.
Just a question of what you need to know.
What's
if
that?
you have to live on the property, they say that you have a single family home apartment, you haven't lived in the property, disclosure, you still have to disclose it.
Yeah, you need to do this disclosure. I mean, I hope Michael Rosales is not right. I mean, I hope he is right, but I don't think he is. There's nowhere on here to me that says that this is optional. And this is also very important for you as a lease listing agent, so that you know what's going on with the property, just like with the listing, so you can position it properly. Hey, King of Leases, do you want to talk about how much in trouble you can get when a landlord doesn't tell you something? No?
Yeah, you can get in trouble.
Yeah.
You can be in court. You can say hi to the
Not your
lawyers.
fault. You're not going to be held liable for it most of the time, although most of the time the company will just kick some money out to for whatever reason to get rid of the lawsuit. But yeah, I mean, what if a seller gives you misinformation? Great example. What if there are 2 homes on a lot and they ask you to rent the back house or the front house? What if it's actually zoned single family and that's a guest house? Can you rent it separately? Depends on the situation, not always. So things like that, right? And are we expected to know this and do all this research? Not necessarily, although I would. So this rental property owner disclosure, even though it's a pain in the ass, and I hope Michael's right, it's not required, you might want it so that you know these things, because in that situation, I would say to the owner, I'm sorry, you already have a tenant in the other house. I cannot rent out this other house because it's a single family. It can only be rented together. So I cannot do this for you.
That's smart.
Yeah. So this property owner disclosure is to help you as well. I'm not going to go through it because I don't even want to look at this thing. But if you've taken disclosure class or you want to look at it online, it's very similar to SBQ and TDS, which is covered in that class. Okay. And then you have Fair Housing and Discrimination Advisory, Consumer Act, Privacy Act. That's it. Remember, what other disclosure do I want to add with this? Agency disclosure. My agency with the landlord. Why? Because our office requires it. The state might not require it because it's not considered a standard agency relationship. I think that's debatable though, and that's why I've never been in a brokerage that didn't require it. Okay, so just keep that in mind. All right, guys, great. You've got your lease
Christy,
listing.
can I ask you a question? So you would suggest to do all this, take it to her and sign it, not by DocuSign. How do I print out? This is the printing. I mean, let's say I'm not writing.
I've downloaded this, but I mean, if you need a basic lesson on zip forms and how to print, I'm pretty sure the tutorial in there can help you with basic navigation. Under help, and it has learning center, you'll find pretty much all the lessons you need. But yes, you can print these out because I've downloaded these and now I can print them, right? And here's a tip, print a couple. Because they're complicated. People accidentally check the wrong answer sometimes they misread the question. Take a couple. All right, so you put your lease listing up on the market. You have showings, then you have potential, you have applicants. So what's the application process look like? I'm not going to go into the application process. So I'm going to stop share for a moment. The documents involved, but I'm going to tell you the easiest, best route. You'll need an application from every adult occupant. They're like, oh, no, but you know, it's not going to be my wife on the lease, just me. I'm responsible for the payment. That girl has some bad credit. And that's fine, but we need to know these things, okay? It is state law, because if you are an adult living in a home for over 30 days, you have automatic tenancy relationship protections and rights. Therefore, it is not optional. We must have an application from every proposed adult tenant. We do not ask for them for children. Okay? We do not ask for minors. I saw a hand somewhere. No?
But if they are a student, can you ask their parents to co-sign and say that you have a house or?
We'll look at guarantor stuff in the next document. Okay, I'll talk about co-signing later. So I need an application. If there's a guarantor, it is mentioned on there. I use, and a credit report for sure. And I want to make sure that credit report is legitimate, right? So I use a service called Rent Spree, RENTSPREE, Rent Spree. It is free for me as an agent. I go and I enter basic information about the property. It creates links, URL codes, is that what a QR code, that I can just give to any prospective tenant. They go in there, they pay the fee directly to the company for the application and the credit report. And it's great because it's a soft credit check. It will not affect their credit. And so I am not damaging them by encouraging them to apply and then them possibly not getting it, okay? So it will come automatically to you, so you will know that it is accurate and unaltered. And then you can share that with the landlord. Also, you'll want to ask if the landlord is interested in moving forward. I will typically out, or there's something going on with the property, there's something sketch, or somebody has bad credit, like husband and wife. Husband has great credit, wife has terrible credit, right? Well, can you show me financials? You know, like I think it would be best for us to provide that to the landlord because, you know, clearly somebody has some credit, you know, like had some credit issues, and that's fine, but just show us the financial ability to pay. A lot of landlords will want to see what's in someone's bank account anyhow, and they'll want pay stubs. If you're self-employed, like all agents are, there's something called a 1040 page of your income taxes, yeah, your tax returns, and that will show after deductions your adjusted income for the last year. So I wanted to rent a fancy place in between the year I started balling and the year I was really poor, but I had the money. So what did I do? I got a commission breakdown, like from my office at the time. And I was just like, can you please give me the commission breakdown? Or I think I had paycheck stubs from those escrows or whatever. So I was able to show that as well. And I think I had like a $8 million deal or something in escrow. So I showed the CDA and I was like, I don't know if you understand this, but the contingencies are removed. I'm also getting this because and my credit was good, but I was very concerned that they would see my last year's income and be like, how can this girl afford this place? I can, let me show it to you. Let me prove it to you. Self-employed people are going to give the 1040. A lot of times the landlord is, and you should, as the listing agent, really want to see much more financial security in investment accounts and in savings accounts, just balances at this point, because as we all know, a self-employed person can go from poor to balling or balling to poor pretty quickly, right? So it's all about proving ability to pay. I usually ask for 3 months paycheck stubs. Sometimes people move because they got a new job, right? New jobs, they can be risky, but you know, that's not up for us to decide. That's up for a landlord to decide. Maybe they don't have a paycheck yet. Well, show us your bank accounts, show us any money you have, and then can you show us your offer letter, right? Or can we, you know, get a verification of what your promised income is from your new employer? Everything.
Can I ask? Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I have a question? So the three last, like the bank statement, this is mandatory or it's just an extra?
It can be an extra. I mean, it depends on what the landlord wants. Some people want more than others. Because I'm self-employed, I have never had a landlord that did not want a copy of my accounts. I'm not giving them every account, you know, as I make more money, yay, I have more accounts with more money. This is good enough, you know what I mean?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So it's up to the landlord, and it's pretty standard, right? We have high rents here. What's going on over there? Are we having music time? So yeah, if the landlord wants to move forward after all of that, then we draft a lease agreement. It is very important to discuss the lease terms with the other agent, if there is another agent, because let me tell you, and I don't know where these lazy lease listing agents got off, but they're like, oh, write the offer, that'll be your, write the lease listing or lease agreement, that will be your offer. No, so much information that goes into that only the listing agent has access to, like the contact information for the landlord. The other agent doesn't have that. So I'm like, no, I'll write you up a summary of offer terms of things you need to know, but I'm not writing the lease agreement. It's not going to be complete. So if I send you one and I sign it, you alter it, it's going to need to be initialed after that, every place you alter it. And I don't know about you, but I don't want counter offers and addendums to my lease agreement. Let's just make this as easy as possible for my $300. You know, like, wah, wah. No, sorry, try again. That's your job, listing agent. In any case, you come to an agreement, you execute the lease, and checks are delivered after you've calculated out, you know, what dollar amount goes where and figured out how that is. And yay. The procedure for getting people in is sometimes easy, sometimes hard. Let me pull up our lease listing agreement or our lease agreement now, and I will share it. The lease agreement. Now, this one's funny, RLMM. In zip forms, if you're trying to find this and you type in the word lease, it does not show up. I don't know why, but if you type in the word month, it will show up. And it freaks people out because it says month to month. It says residential lease or month to month agreement. I'm sorry, use that vacation rental agreement. Don't use this for a month to month. Okay, if it's under 30 days, this stuff doesn't apply. If it's over 30, like if you have a month with 31 days in it, you do need this. Okay. Yeah. All right, so you're gonna have all the information here. Look at, like I said, look at the MLS for information that you need for entry. So you ask the landlord for the information when you put it in the MLS. You may want to look at a lease agreement if you're going to take a lease listing as well, so that you know the answers to these things, so that you can let the other agent and or just tenant know up front. People don't start to get weird and nitty gritty about negotiations when you've just presented it to be this way up front. When they believe they have options, they start trying to go back and forth. And like I said, it is very common and often that once we start getting to drafting the lease agreement, things fall apart. Very common. It is when a landlord or a tenant can show themselves to be very difficult to the other party. And they're like, oh, this is not signed yet. Fuck yes. Thank you for showing me who you are. I want nothing to do with you. Right? I'm sorry, I'm not going to bind myself to you for a year. You've just shown me that you're really difficult. You know, like one of my team agents today was drafting a lease listing agreement and she has 29 questions. Oh, like 24-hour notice of entry. That's not standard law. And I'm like, you can let her know it is if you want to, or you can just tell her, you know what? Whatever rinky-dink attorney you're talking to out of the country or in another state, tell them that they just lost you this house. We don't want to deal with that. This one is that one that we have to manage for the property owner. We don't want to deal with her. If we think we can rent it easily to someone else. If we don't have much option. All right, so standard provision. A guest cannot stay in a home longer than 14 days without housing provider's written consent. I believe in the city of Los Angeles that is circumvented by the emergency protective order. I don't think that any landlord is currently allowed to make any demands upon or punish you as a tenant, serve you any notice in any way for having anyone you want move in, I think including animals, but read the emergency protective order. This could apply to just rent control property or the entire city, I don't remember. And even if you read it, you're probably going to get confused just like I am, because the state did things, the county did things, and the city did things. And some of it applies to all property and some of it applies to rent control property. And I'm not sure which. I stopped trying. I'm like, no, just talk to the attorney that I referred to you. I can't be responsible for this. It's too much. Yeah. Personal property maintained. Well, we know the answer to that, but just like inclusions and exclusions in a residential purchase agreement, the lease listing agreement is just between listing agent and landlord, right? That doesn't mean the tenant agreed to it, so it needs to be reiterated here, whatever it is. And can the landlord choose to go ahead and change their mind and say, yes, I'm going to maintain everything like I'm supposed to, even if they disagreed initially? Absolutely. So it doesn't matter what's in the lease listing agreement, because the tenant wasn't part of that agreement. You must have those terms reflected in the lease agreement. Don't get lazy. It has to go here as well. And it may not be the same. Okay. Premises may be subject to a local rent control ordinance. Again, I do know what LA's is. I have the code. I don't want to get fancy or responsible for being right about this. I think it's good enough as it is written. Term, when does the lease start? Commencement date. Okay. Is it a lease or a month to month? And if it's a lease, when does it end? I like to say on whatever date at 11:59 p.m. I do not think that it's fair to charge a tenant for a day of rent where they have to turn over possession at 1 p.m. Plus, you know that when people move out, oh my God, everything always runs late. Nothing goes right. It is always more work than you think. It is a nightmare. Don't set people up for failure. Set them up for success. 11:59 p.m. is a smart choice here. Would I lose a lease over it if I was representing the tenant and it was in here at 1 p.m.? No. Remember, this is a great time to like not be difficult, because this is most of the time where a lease falls apart is when it gets into this stuff. Okay, how much is the dollar amount per month for the lease? It's payable on the 1st or some other day if you agree to that. How should rent be paid? Remember, we must give them one of these 3 options: personal check, money order, or cashier's check, and say who it should be made payable to. We may also say wire, electronic payment, but it can't be the only thing that we say because of California state law. And we give information here, okay? Or we'd say it will not be accepted. Who it should be delivered to, and contact information for that person. Okay, you do not have to give them an option to personally deliver it. Okay. If any payment is returned for non-sufficient funds, well, then this agreement, if it's checked for cash, money order or cashier's check, says, okay, well, tenant, if your check bounces, all future rent payments I require to be by funds that are certified. Security deposit, okay? If my rent is $10,000 a month, how much, and it is unfurnished, how much is the max we can charge here?
20.
What if they have 6 dogs? Still 20, yeah. How about if it's furnished?
30,000.
Great. 30.
Right? 30.
Yeah, it's 10,000 a month.
Yeah, but rent
3 months, the rent
is 30,000. Yeah, that's
you
what
said
I said.
3.
I said 30. Trust me. Sorry, I won't mumble.
You're all right. All right. Security deposit will be, and this is the way it's written in here, and you should leave it this way: transferred to the owner and held by the owner of the transferred to and held by the owner of the premises, or held in owner's broker's trust account. We don't have a broker's trust account. We haven't done that in like 30 years. I don't even remember how, and you're so happy and lucky that you never have to do this. You've done it, John, right?
Yeah,
it's like, this doesn't even really make sense, does it?
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm like, I do what? This is the one thing I'm like, I will never figure this out, ever. Okay. I'm glad it's fun. All right. So what can security deposit be used for? Okay, as reasonably necessary. So if a tenant is in default of rental payment, which includes late charges, non-sufficient fees, or other sums due, although not in the city of Los Angeles, I want you to be very careful about this. Do not advise your clients that they can take rent funds from deposit funds. The city of Los Angeles was funny. An owner who has security deposit is not supposed to commingle those funds in the city of Los Angeles with their own funds. So they should technically have a separate bank account for that dollar amount. And in some instances, it has to be an interest-bearing account, and they have to return that security deposit as well as the interest funds to the tenant.
Really?
I don't know.
What?
I've only had one landlord that I've ever met in my entire life who did it correctly. I don't think most people know this, but I want you to know this. Okay, and it's not all properties, like all rent control properties, 100%, it must be interest bearing. And all that interest must be returned to the tenant. So it'd be tough to keep track of if you have an, you know, like a 20 unit building. Would I have to have 20 separate accounts? I'm sure there's a special type of account for that. I don't know though. Do you know seeing people's like income financials? You probably wouldn't get that detailed of a view. in any case, it needs to be separate, okay? And I don't know that it can be used for unpaid rent, particularly during the emergency order, right? There are legal ways to withhold rent from landlords in the state of California. So if my heater's out and my landlord just won't fix it, that means by law, my home is uninhabitable. I may withhold rent from him until he fixes it. Okay, so I want you to just be very careful in advising here. If your clients have any question about how security deposit funds are to be used, they should speak to who?
A real estate attorney.
A real estate attorney, that's right. And one who specializes in landlord-tenant law, landlord-tenant, I can speak. You know what I mean. Tenants, landlord.
I don't know what the interest should be on your security.
You don't know. The bank's telling you, you get an itemized statement. I think Beverly Hills, West Hollywood also does. It's not much. I mean, I lived in a property for years and I think I got like pages. $6. Oh, yeah, that's why nobody cares. Oh, wow. That's why nobody cares. I don't know what you're thinking, but it's not like there are these high yield investment, like savings investments accounts. If you know of one, please let me know. I would like to open one. Yeah, that's why no one cares. I mean, I've seen some like funny ones that are 43 cents. And I'm like, oh God, no. I'm like, you can keep the 43 cents, bro.
Yeah. Online savings accounts are paying like 3.75 to 4% now.
Yeah, but be wary, you can't get your money out. I've had many earnest money deposit contingency miss or closing deadline miss because of an online banking account. They're supposed to send your money out like within 24 hours or even the same day. They'll hold it. Like they'll find some loophole to hold it 2 or 3 days. So just be wary with online investment accounts, especially for your clients and advice as well. Like if you see something like a weird bank name where it's clear that it's an E account, ask them about that. Tell them to call their bank and make sure they know the process and timeframes for getting any money they're planning on using from that account for their earnest money or for a lease or anything like that. Okay.
Your classes pop up on my phone.
My classes?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Payment of last month's rent. Look, security deposit shall not be used by tenant in lieu of payment of last month's rent. And here you are. So any person who's old school and is talking about last month's rent, that's more for the tenant. It's like tenant. You can't just be like, oh, use my security deposit because I'm leaving. And that's because security deposit is for potential damage, right? So what happens if the landlord's like, okay, cool, and I leave the place a mess and now there's not enough security deposit to repair the damage that I've caused, right?
And if it's carpet, it's walls.
Yeah.
Walls.
I don't know who's putting holes in walls, but you know. Well, that's not true. I remember my little brother when we were little. All right, move-in costs. So not all rentals start from the 1st or the 15th or any specific day. If it is a short time in a month before the next month, so let's say there's 4 more days in this month or even half of a month left, it might not be uncommon for the landlord to want the prorated dollar amount for the rent left from the move-in date to the end of this current month, as well as the next month's rent. So if today were March 19th and we prorated the rent, it's based on how many days, guys, are all real estate 30 days. All real estate prorations are based on 30-day month. So I take that rent, that dollar amount, let's say it's $3,000 to make it easy. I divide by 30. How much is that per day? 3,000 divided by 30?
100.
So 100 per diem. That's our rate. So if our lease starts on, let's just say 3/28, it's 100 for 1, 2, 3, 4 days. So that's $400. So it's rent from what date? From the 3/28 to 3/31, and the total due would say $400. Okay. Security deposit on that $3,000 a month, the max $6,000, right? Guys, oh, I am sharing with you, good. And my landlord doesn't trust me because my credit's iffy. That's probably not why. Just because the month is almost ending by the time I move in. They want April month. They want April rent too. Remember, in lower end rentals, as we become more aggressive, people don't have that ability, even though they might still be good renters. So we can't get too aggressive in lower end without shooting ourselves in the foot. Okay, so if it was like 315 move in, sometimes I'm fine with that. But if it is the 328, I also want the April, because if you don't have that money in the 4 days of moving in, we're gonna have some problems right away, right? Total due. I don't have any payment received at the time that I'm drafting a lease agreement because they don't even know how much money they need from me. We don't know that we have a lease. So there's never been a time where I had payment received. So the balance due will always reflect exactly the total due. And then the due date. I give people 3 business days to get me cashier's checks, money order, or wire, whatever it is we're doing. Okay. Because if I sign this with them on Thursday, I don't know about you, but my Friday is completely packed. I'm not making it to the bank until Saturday at the earliest, which means I can maybe give this check to the other agent, you know, give a check to whoever's asking for it. Monday. Well, maybe the weekend, maybe Monday. Yeah.
The D said no interest will be paid on security deposit unless required by the law.
By local law. And it is in Los Angeles on rent control properties.
Oh, rent control.
It might even be required in the entire city. I don't know.
You know, so you have to ask this tenant.
Who do we ask this question? Because I'm also renting.
Real estate attorney. But this is not our place to be advising a landlord on.
Oh.
We are not their attorney. Anyways, payable to, that's whatever name or entity that the check needs to be payable to. Late fee. So the way that our lease agreement is written is that if any rent is received more than 5 days past the due date, it's a 5-day grace period. Then there is a late fee in the sum of blank or percent. Flat fee is pretty typical. At this point, I advise my clients not to make this number so large that it would put the tenant who is clearly, well, either, you know, forgetting just to pay the rent. Like when I had the mail rent, I would forget a couple times, forget to like actually sit down and write the check. So I just started writing out checks for like 3 months at a time. I'm like, I need to remember to send this check. It's annoying to mail it and to take it to the post office, because when I put it in my mailbox, they didn't always pick it up. Didn't always make it where it needed to. So in any case, I try to not make this number so large that it would put any struggling tenant who has all the intention of the world of paying their rent. I don't want to make it so that it gives them so much hardship they can't. So I base this dollar amount on the rental amount, right? If it's like $2,500 a month rental, my late fee is going to be 50 or 75 tops. I mean, obviously it's up to the landlord. Once I start getting into more expensive property, like the 10,000 I just leased out, I want, you know, $400. That's a lot of money, right? Parking's permitted as follows. And if the parking is included in the rent that's charged, or if there's separate parking rent, there are some buildings that have limited parking. If there's enough parking for everyone, they must allow, thank you, everyone to have a shot at it. But if there's not enough, a lot of times landlords will have a tenant pay for it. Same thing with storage, but this is not common. This is something I see like in lower end rentals, large buildings. I ran into it a lot of times out in K-Town. We consider it kind of like low class to charge rent for parking, if there is parking. But when there is no parking, as a landlord, who do I decide to give it to? The highest bidder probably is the least headache for me. You know, like otherwise I just have people being unhappy and fighting over it. Same thing with storage. And then you're going to identify what utilities are paid by tenant, what are paid by landlord. Let's talk about that real quick. In an apartment building, it is common for a landlord to cover what utilities?
Water and power.
No.
Water. Water.
Yeah. And sometimes garbage removal.
If it's More than 5 units, yes, garbage removal. Because if it's more than 5 units, by law, a landlord's supposed to have one of those large dumpsters. If it's under 5 units, you would have your individual trash can and you would be responsible for it because in the city, at least in the city of LA, it is connected to your power bill. It cannot be separated out. I actually had a landlord do that on accident. And so I would send them copies of my bill every month. Again, don't rent to a real estate agent. I was like, oh, so it can't be separated out, but in our lease agreement it says you're gonna pay for it. So here are my bills. So send it on back. She wasn't very nice. Otherwise I would have cared. And I still needed money really bad then. I was super broke. Every dollar counted. I mean, it's a difference between, you know, like meat and vegetable or top ramen at that, to me at that point. So hey, don't judge. You would do it too.
And for a house here, it's a gardener.
House, gardener, and pool if there's a pool. But a tenant would also be expected to cover water at this point. Okay. If there are sub-meters, they're done differently. I don't quite remember, and this is not super common. This is usually when a property has been converted into several smaller units from a larger one at some point, or a second unit's been put on a property that was formerly single family residence. Go ahead and read through that. I think it's very important for you to know this. I want you to be very skeptical if you ever go to a property that has more than 1 unit on it and you don't see more than 1 utility meter for each. You don't see an individual utility meter for each home. This is always a key indicator. It is not permitted to be rented separately. It is not always the case though. Yes.
I have a house. I mean, it's a ADU added to the unit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm renting out to the student, everybody pays that. But if I want to rent to the family, the house is separate.
I don't know what you have to call the city that it's in and ask them.
Oh.
I don't know. I haven't dealt with that situation. I don't really want to. I don't want to deal with the lease at all. The only reason I'm teaching you this is because it's really important for you as agents to know how to handle leases, because a lot of your clients are going to be buying and selling rental property, right? I don't get paid on leases from new agents, but this is an integral part to winning the client. So I don't know, John. I'm sorry. I don't want to know. But if you find out, let us know. Call the city. Call the city. Yeah. Most cities have a hotline just for ADU stuff. Yeah. You're welcome. Condition of premises. Okay, so you can use what's called a MIMO, move in, move out. It's basically a form that you fill out, kind of like an agent visual inspection disclosure, where you go through the whole house and talk about condition of things. I'd always recommend taking a video also.
Where's that? Sorry, I lost it.
Section 10. So I've never used MII. I don't even know what it is. I usually use this one. Oh, do we not have MIMO anymore? Is it called MII now? It used to be called MIMO, move in, move out. Anyways, if you type in move in zip forms, you'll see it. Oh yeah. I wasn't lying to you when I told you it was a lot of work for very little money. Maintenance use and reporting. So again, it goes over maintenance use. So this is, I would cover this under utilities, but also maintenance, because there's a difference. The housing provider might pay for the water, but they might not be the one to water it. There might be automatic sprinklers there, but the landlord's not living there. So the tenant is going to be responsible for notifying the landlord if the sprinkler stopped working, right? If the landlord doesn't know about it, they can't fix it. And then all of the landscaping and the grass, all of that's going to die. So there's a difference between who's in charge of watering, even if the tenant's not actually watering. I'll tell you this, there's no chance I'd sign a lease agreement where I have to go out there and water with the hose. I can't even feed myself if I want to, when I want to. Water every day? Yeah, right.
Crystal, can I ask a
yes.
question? The landlord has solar, okay, and she's paying yearly for the solar, but the tenant needs to pay for the utilities. Where does she write that?
I have no idea. I would talk to Michael Rosales. I've never run into that situation in my entire existence as an agent. That sounds complicated. I would assume there'd be no way to tell unless there are great bills. I would assume that the landlord just has to let the tenant have the free utility. Make sure to exclude the solar panels if you're doing that.
Yeah.
As an excluded item. Yeah, ask Michael Rosales. That sounds very complicated to me. And let us know what he says. All right, pets, there's a pet addendum. The acronym for it is PET. Okay, so you check this box. You wouldn't write it into the lease agreement. You would fill out the pet addendum. It's pretty simple. The way that contract is written is that nothing should be smoked at the property. If there's an HOA, you have to provide the tenant with a copy of the rules and regulations and CC&Rs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Because how can the tenant follow the building's rules if they don't know what they are? And the HOA will penalize the owner, not the tenant, if the rules are violated. You're all right, you'll live. Why? Is it a condo on top of it?
No, it's a house,
Okay.
but I have to do this. You know why? Because my brother wants me to do lease for him on 4 properties, and I need to learn this time, so I do it better on his. So this is it.
All right, so then you have to say what you're giving to the tenant about keys to mailbox, common areas, how many. You have to tell them if the property's been rekeyed since the last resident was there or not. Talks about entry, that 24-hour written notice is state law. Can something else be negotiated and written to the contract? Yes, it is non-enforceable though. It doesn't matter what tenant and landlord agree to. State law trumps any provision that we write. We cannot circumvent state law. Okay. Whether or not the tenant would permit the use of a lockbox there, like there is a management company, does the management company have all the keys, or will there be a lockbox, that kind of thing. No assignment, no subletting. Subletting is not legal unless you modify the contract. I've had this happen. What if your soon-to-be new landlord cannot deliver the house to you? Well, the contract says that if the landlord delivers it cannot deliver it within 5 days of what is supposed to be the commencement date, that the tenant has the right to be refunded and walk away from this entirely. I had this happen and the asshole didn't have the money. He was using, as tenants moved into the building, their security deposit to fix up the unit for the tenant before. Thankfully, I was not in top ramen days. I was probably in between meat and vegetable and top ramen days at that point in time. And I was like, I don't want to live in this building under any circumstances. Like, how about if I reduce your rent a little bit? I was like, oh, hell no, you have less financial solvency than I do. Yes.
Can you please tell a few more words about what does it mean, like deliver possession?
If I tell you you're going to move in on the 1st and on the 6th, I still can't let you move in for some reason.
But if you give me the key, but I can see that it stays in horrible condition. And
This is not condition, this is possession.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the keys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Tenants.
Can we fight with the landlord if it's that condition?
Yeah, but you know what? Don't fight. Put it in the lease agreement so it's a contract. So it's enforceable. Tenant's obligations upon vacating premises, clean, in the same condition, all the keys. Everything should be the same minus regular, like normal wear and tear. What is normal wear and tear? I have no clue. But the court seemed to have a pretty reasonable idea of it. Like, is this something that could happen just because? Yeah, I'm a super, super clean person, but I have the cheapest walls, like the cheapest. I think that they use primer on my walls. If you have a leather jacket on in my house and you lean up against the wall, or I set my purse down on my credenza, if it touches the wall, there will be a black mark. Yeah. And I don't know how or why, like, fuck, pay $10 more for the paint, the good paint. Me and my magic erasers, I would have given you the extra money.
Yeah.
The amount of magic eraser money I've spent on getting these fucking marks off my wall, like, don't do that cheap. So if my, I will tell you this, like, my landlord is notorious for being a slumlord. Okay. She has a provision in the lease agreement that says, no matter what, I will pay for the entire apartment to be repainted when I leave. That violates state law. And I will make sure when I move out, I will let her know, I know I signed this, but I also know, and I know you know that you cannot do this. So I'd like my pre-move out inspection and I intend to fight you until I die on anything that you try to bug me with. Out of the manner of, you know, like, it's not even about the money, it's the principle. especially because I told you. I'm letting you know it's not going to work on this one. Better luck for the person who doesn't know. And believe me, when I was a kid, I didn't know a lot of these things. So yeah, it doesn't matter what's in the agreement. If it violates law, it violates law. What about nicks and things like that? I mean, like normal wear and tear is conditional and it's really hard. But you tend to have like two types of landlords. Fuckers like mine who are trying to like put in illegal provisions into a contract, hoping you don't know any better. I'm like, I'll sign it all day long because it doesn't matter what's in there. Or the others who are like, oh, was it clean? Is, you know, like they're not trying, they're being honest. They're honest. They're not trying to take the security deposit. Okay. Right to pre-move out inspections and repairs. Homework. I want you to read about pre-move out inspections. This is California state law. It applies to all properties. It's very important. And if you are in a rental property, you will be happy for no other reason other than I saved you some of your security deposit money next time you move out of a place. Pre-move out inspection. Read about that. This is where I talk about if the tenant needs to carry that renter's insurance. Ooh. And then notices. It is not legal for a landlord not to provide tenant with a way to send them legal notices. So you'll see property management companies put the property management company in here. That's not legal. They must provide the owner's contact information or service or registered agent for service provider. So if it's an LLC that owns the property, there'll be something called a statement of information filed with the Secretary of State that says, here is the contact information for the person that should be provided with any legal notices in relation with this entity. And if you don't know what that is, that's fine. If you ever need to know, come and see me, but Secretary of State website will help you out with that. It's pretty, you'll figure it out. Okay. There's a whole bunch of disclosures that come here. Hold on, John. A whole bunch of disclosures that come here. And it doesn't matter what's on this lease. KW requires a ton of them. You find them the same way you find disclosures for a sale by going into KW command and making a list for yourself. You have to look at what's required by KW and the state for listing and at the time it's rented if you are the listing agent, right? Yes, John.
If there is anything that the tenant has got the insurance on the house and all of a sudden the rain comes in and they damage the roof and then there's a mold in the house, does the insurance pay for it or the landlord has to pay?
That's going to be a landlord. That's not going to be mold caused by water damage from an exterior source. That's going to be a landlord responsibility. Yeah. Okay.
What is this meth thing, Christen? Who does meth?
I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it's not legal. I'm pretty sure I'm positive it's not legal to sell or rent a home that is contaminated by methamphetamine. So I always laugh that this is in here. I think it's for talking about previous methamphetamine contamination. Oh, I don't think we have many meth labs in the area we're working in, thankfully. But I will tell you, you know, I did not grow up so well. And I am pretty sure at least one of my parents was involved with one of those somewhere, someplace, sometime.
Those things blow up sometimes.
What's that?
They blow up sometimes.
No, they're worried about that it could be on the walls.
The chemicals,
right?
yeah. Yeah, I don't want to go into it because you're not going to be involved with this. If there was a meth lab in any of these homes, you're not touching it. You can't. By the time it's mediated properly by the local laws and the state laws, that person may as well have just torn it down and done new construction. Okay. Confirmation of agencies, we know about that already from RPA. Any other terms, any amendments or other documents you're attaching to the lease agreement? What if you have a very long list of items included for a fully furnished place, that kind of thing? Legally authorized signer, if there was an interpreter. And then who is managing the property? The way it's default written is the owner. And so when the owner's like, oh, I want you to do this. Sorry. Part of contract, it's not something I'm paid for. It's not something that I am capable or qualified to perform. I am not the property manager. So the owner is, or they hire a property management firm. Okay.
On the section for interpreter, for example, I speak Spanish, right? So if I'm helping a client that speaks only Spanish, what do I do there?
I guess you put your name. I don't know if that opens you up to liability or not, or if it needs to be a third party for contract. Ask Michael. Ask Michael. I mean, it's just a lease. How can it get more complicated? Housing provider, entity tenant. So if it's entity tenants are tricky. Talk to Michael and make sure the landlord's safe, comfortable with that. That's a pretty advanced, so I'm not going to go into it. Tenant sign. Here's where, John, if there's a guarantor, they also sign the contract.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Same thing if the housing provider, the owner is an LLC, a trust, anything but a natural person's name, you would fill that out all here, just like I showed you on the lease listing agreement, to show what kind of authority they have to act on behalf of that entity. Okay. Signatures, almost fucking done. Agent signatures, you're done. Oh my God, now have fun with all the disclosures. We're not going through.
Oh my God.
Yes. Oh, this is not even what you need. This is just what comes with the contract. KW has a list of where you need to add to it.
We're done.
Yeah, look at that. All right, we're done. Does anyone have any other questions for me? I know this class was long. I'm sorry, it's because I don't want to break this into two parts. I like to just get lease over with and done. No more questions? Okay, don't go yet. Don't go yet. Don't go yet. I have just finished my 10-week course. Thank fucking God. I am off for the next 2 weeks, so I will not teach for 2 weeks. And then the following 6 weeks, I will teach again Wednesdays and Thursdays.
I'm going to be again.
You're going to be what?
She'll be here.
Okay, great. And then week 7, 8, 9, and 10, I will teach once a week, take 2 weeks off, and then start again. This was a weird time because I have just reconstructed the mentorship education, and Justin teaches fewer classes than me, so we were off, and I wanted us to finish at the same time.
Thank you. Okay, Chris, are they supposed to send us new information via email with the new program?
They were supposed to, but I guess I will. Just email me if you want a copy of any of that. Everybody in the office, any of the office staff has a copy of the revised mentorship agreement. Everybody has that.
We have to worry about the rent cap. I mean,
what?
The rent cap.
The rent cap?
And adjust.
I'm not going to go into that, man. That's more complicated. It's city, rent control, and state. It's dependent. I would call the city if you have any concerns with that. You're welcome. Okay, so love you. If you need to catch up, if you want to study ahead, if you're new, I would highly recommend that. Then please go to YouTube, watch for the 2 weeks I'm gone, and read these documents. Try to fill one out with your mentor or at least a friend. It is not something I require of the mentor since we're not paid on it. But if they'll help you, see if they'll help you.
Thank you, Kristen. Enjoy your time off.
Thank you. I'll still be working, man.
Thank you.
So not teaching. You're welcome.
Thank you. We learned so much.
Thank you. You're welcome.